all of my life, I felt like, I've prided myself in not being a quitter. Like when it comes to grit, I've always felt like I have as much grit as anyone else out there. But I started to doubt myself, after 2 DNFs last year. Am I really that tough? Do I really have that grit? And then it came into question, at at Tahoe.
Hey everybody, it's Tony Klein, and I am here with Jason Brock, the winner of this year's Triple Crown of 200's. Jason, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Glad to talk to you.
Yeah, so we're gonna dive into this incredible year that you had, but before we do that, I kind of want to let people know a little bit about you, give you an opportunity to kind of tell us about yourself and sort of what got you into racing, and then we'll kind of go into your race history a little bit before we get into the juicy 200's here.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm originally from California, Northern California, about halfway between Tahoe and San Francisco, so just outside of Sacramento. Born and raised in that area. Was living. I was 1 year old and living a mile away from Placer High track, where Western States, was finishing its inaugural year as a race, but didn't really know anything about ultra marathons or ultra, trail running at all growing up until I was living in Utah. Spent most of my adult life in Utah, and it's per capita probably the biggest trail running state in the nation, as far as I can tell. Super popular. Trails are full of runners. The mountains are full of runners. The desert is full of runners. It's just lots of trail running here. So that's where I got introduced to ultra marathons. I have a buddy, Brian Brady, who we started doing Olympic distance triathlons, and then half marathons, and then marathons. And along the way, he just kept pushing me to do longer and longer distances. And I remember when he suggested, I start doing marathons, and I thought, well, that's just stupid, because I'm pretty sure a horse can't run 26 miles without taking a break. I think I read that somewhere. This seems really excessive. I know there are crazy people who run marathons, but I don't think that's healthy. I don't think the average human should be running a marathon. And slippery slope, here I am doing 200's. So that's kind of how I got to trail running. I did it later in life, started about 2014, 2015. And so really later life kind of entry into the ultra running scene. So I don't consider myself, elite or super competitive. I'm kind of a, mainly weekend runner, and just do what I can do.
Well, that's you may consider yourself that, but I've seen stats that kind of speak otherwise. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. But I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to touch on what you did this year with the races you've done. But you had mentioned Utah, and there's a race out there called the Bear 100, and then you mentioned Western States. And before we talk about some of the great things that you've done, I did notice, I was on your ultra sign up, and I did notice that in 2021 you had a couple of races that maybe didn't go your way, and one was the Bear 100, and the other one was Western States, and both of those you wound up finding yourself with the DNF. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is I really want to show sort of this transition of what happened in 2021 to what you were able to accomplish in 2022. So I don't know if you have any light to shed on those two.
Yeah, it's funny that you picked up on that, because this was not something we talked about in advance of this discussion, but I think it's actually a really important part of my kind of 2022 story. 2021 was a really rough year for me. I think a lot of us were still struggling with, the new normals, driven by the pandemic. And I was working hard to, start a new business, basically from scratch. And I started 2021 with some knee issues. Not typical for me. I don't generally have a lot of injuries, but started off kind of slow, didn't really run until kind of April of 2021. Had gotten into, after 5 years of the lottery and then one push because of 2020 for Western States. But the long of it is that I, had a long series of injuries and health issues throughout 2021. I had a torn hip flexor in August, that basically I couldn't even walk a 25-minute mile. I basically hobbled like a 30-minute mile just to kind of try to keep mobile a little bit. So I limped everywhere I went. Had a blood clot in October, from mid-thigh all the way down to my ankle, completely blocked. So that was pretty scary. And then I got COVID in December. So it was, 2021 was just marked with a whole series of kind of health related issues, probably some of which were frankly stress related. And I'm sure, many people can relate to, the stresses felt during 2020 and 2021. So for Western States, the issue was heat. It was one of the hotter years they'd had. And I got to a point where it was 2 a.m. and I kept begging for it to cool down. It was still in the kind of, lower mid 80s. And I really didn't feel like I was sweating anymore. I was just so overheated. I should have finished. I could have finished. It's the most kind of disappointing thing about racing, and, one of the biggest disappointments in life for me. I signed up for Bear. It was a very different story. For Bear, I had signed up, got in very late off the wait list, and was injured. I had a torn hip flexor. I really went into it expecting that, there's a good chance I wouldn't be able to finish. I enjoyed that race maybe more than any other race I've ever done, because I just chilled out, kind of back of the pack, talked to people, made a lot of, new acquaintances on the trail, got to, talk way more than you normally do towards kind of mid front of the pack, where you're just leapfrogging people and you're not really with them very much. But so it was a really fun event, but ultimately, like 60 miles in, I tripped on a downhill and exacerbated the tear, and I spent the next hour hobbling, a mile and a half into the next aid station, and had to call it quits. Without the trip, I still thought in the re-injury, I thought it was possible to finish. So DNF at Bear is not a big deal for me. The DNF at Western States, like, still just eats at me. So that kind of set up 2022 for me, because 2022 was a year of redemption, and I was going to make the best of it.
I want to talk a little bit about that, but I think it's important because I think we've all gone through this. I've not been lucky enough to get into Western States, and there are people who try for year after year after year who don't get in. And so I want to dig in just briefly the mentality of, exactly what happened when you finally surrendered and gave in, because I know, at least for me, the pain of that really motivated me to be able to continue on and perform better. And I use that in future races. So I just want to talk a little bit about kind of what you went through when you wound up, giving your final notice there.
Yeah, it was it was my first and what I would consider only true giving up in a race. I've DNF'd races before because of injury or to protect, my ability to do another race, and not put myself in a position where I was compromising future events or future goals. But Western States was just flat out, I gave up and I regret it. But I think, and so I hadn't gone through that before. And I'd done, I don't know, prior to that, maybe 9 hundreds. So and without really quote unquote giving up. So it was interesting to go through that process that so many runners, even very successful elite runners, go through, where you get to the point where, the way I'd sum it up, you are in so much pain and discomfort that that's the only thing your brain and emotions are focused on. And you lose sight of any sort of bigger picture, your ultimate goals, why you're here, the fact that it took me 5 years to get into this stupid race. And I'm so close to the finish. I mean, I was at the river crossing, I was at Rucky Chucky, and I was right there. I mean, basically the hard miles were over for the race, but none of that mattered because I wasn't even conscious of it. All I was mentally focused on, emotionally focused on, was this sucks. It sucked for a long time. It had already been going on for hours and hours and hours, and I'm just so miserable. And I think that's ultimately what drives most people to quit, whether it's 100-mile distance, 200, whatever it is they get to a point. Sometimes there is a medical issue, so it's not like everyone gives up, that their lack of will is the problem. Some people have, serious issues, physically going on. For me, that wasn't it. I gave up. And again, as I was driving to my parents' house, just 15 minutes away, where I grew up. I mean, this is my backyard. I lost sight of what was more important, and it was almost immediate regret. But once they cut that wristband at Western States, there is no re-entry into the race. So it wasn't like, I mean, even by the time I had gotten to my parents' house, there was still time to finish the race. I could have turned around, restarted and finished within the cutoff, but that wasn't an option. Once they snip it, you're done.
Sure. It's really interesting to me, the psychology behind just how deep and dark it gets on these races sometimes. And the reason I was digging into that is just, I agree most of the time. And there are times physically where we wind up having to drop. But I've found most of the drops that I hear about are we get buried under this negativity, and there's almost always time to reset and refinish. And one of the things that me and my crew, we really focus on is we don't celebrate when we get to an aid station. We celebrate when we leave an aid station. Yeah. Simply because that's the only place you can actually quit, right? The rest of the race, you can't quit. You can quit, but until you get to an aid station to tell somebody, it doesn't matter. So, yeah. So, okay, let's dive in a little bit deeper now. Let's shift gears. You've had this opportunity kind of slip through your fingers of being able to finish the Western States. And now we're heading into 2022. You're using that for motivation to move forward. I want to give some stats here on the Triple Crown. And then I want you to talk a little bit about what that actually is. So, Jason, you finished in first place with a total combined finish time of 226 hours, 16 minutes, 9 seconds. The drop rate for the Triple Crown is 42.1%, which means there's about almost 58% finishing rate, which to go for the amount of miles, I don't know what the actual mileage is, because I know last year there was a little bit of a different course for Tahoe, but it's over 640 miles. Do you have an idea of like what you actually clocked?
Yeah, it's pretty darn close to 650. Tahoe ran maybe a couple miles short from the normal course. It's almost when they switched to the out and back from the loop, the Heavenly Resort aid station is darn near halfway, and it's normally about a 205 and a half miles. So it was basically 203, I think, by my watch. Bigfoot runs 209, almost 210. It was about 205 by my watch. And then Moab 240 runs a little bit short by my watch as well. So it's right around, 650. I don't, no two people will agree on the exact distance. That much I know.
Yeah, that's a long ways for the GPS or for somebody with a tape measure to actually get exactly right. But
yeah, I'd love to see that guy out there with his wheel rolling that course. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So for those that don't know, who are just kind of hearing about the Triple Crown at 200s, maybe you can share a little bit about what that is, how you got into it, what made you decide to get into it, and then we can talk about each race specifically after that.
Yeah. So 200s are newer. I don't know how many 200s there are in the US at this point, but I'd be surprised if the ones with any sort of draw, meaning 100 or more racers, I'd be surprised if there's more than 10 of them. I haven't looked into it, but there's not that many of them. So in the most popular, the Triple Crown represent three of the definitely the most popular of them. They each started at different times. Candace Burt started all three of them, and I believe Tahoe was the first, and I think Moab may have been second, and then Bigfoot. But at any rate, they've only been going on for 8-9 years. And I did my first Tahoe, which was Tahoe in 2018. And the initial draw, so Phil Lowry, who Tony, I'm sure
Sure.
AKA Phil Clark, he's done a ton of these. He lived in Utah for quite a while, and he was the first one really to tell me about these 200s. He had just completed his first, I believe, in August of 2017. He'll correct me, I'm sure, after this if I'm wrong. But so he and I came across each other on the Wasatch 100 course. So we were kind of running along, roughly 25 miles into Wasatch 100 in 2017, and they said, "Hey Phil, I hear you just did a 200." And he's like, "Oh, 200s are the best." He just done, I think, Bigfoot, and he was just blown away by that course, by the structure. And I mean, honestly, the biggest attraction to 200s is the ability to sleep without fear of reproach. I mean, 100-miler is too short, but to really justify a nap. but I cannot, for some reason, I just cannot make it through the night. My circadian rhythm is way too strong and I get so sleepy. From 12 to 4 o'clock in the morning, my body is just shutting, not normally, just when I'm out in the mountains having, run all day long.
Yeah, I was gonna say you've been working pretty hard all day. I think
Yeah, you get up in the dark, you start running in the dark, you watch the sunrise, you run all day through the heat, sun sets, and 5-6 hours later, your body's like, dude, I'm done. What are you doing to me? And my body, I know a lot of people struggle to stay awake, but I literally start passing out. Like I start falling, like at risk of falling down and collapsing on the trail. So I thought 200s probably suited me better. And I think they do. I mean, after having done 6 of these now, I would say the format just works better for me because of my inability to really kind of stay up all night on trail. So that was the initial attraction. Is still a pretty big part of why I kind of prefer 200s to 100s.
I think with the 200s too, with that format, if you learn how to suffer well, you go through several cycles of the ups and downs. And so as long as you keep going, there's always time for things to get better. And that's one of the things I really like about them too, is that they're almost multiple races, especially, with Moab, with the different scenery. It's almost like 4 separate races with the different environments that you go through. So
yeah.
So what made you decide to go from, okay, you did Tahoe, and then I think you did a couple of others before you wound up deciding to sign up for the Triple Crown for last year.
Yeah, so I did Tahoe 18-19. It was canceled 20 and 21. I did Moab in 20, and that was rough. That was definitely the roughest of the 6 for me. It was hotter in 2020 than it was this year. And even though I've been down to Moab, I'd run in the LaSalle's before that race. I did not appreciate the sun exposure. And so in 2020, when the temps were in the 80s, it just, in the desert, 80s are basically hundreds. There's no shade hardly anywhere. And I just remember really wanting to like curl up in the fetal position underneath some scrub brush to get some shade. It was miserable. So I'd done 3 before. Felt like course knowledge goes a long way. Hadn't done Bigfoot, so this year was my first Bigfoot. Absolutely love that course. So yeah, I had experience and had done generally well at all of them before. So yeah, that was kind of background going into it.
Okay, so let's start with, so we're into this year. On June 17th, 2022, you line up at the starting line of the Tahoe 200, and you wind up you finish the race 67 hours, 57 minutes, and 18 seconds. I wasn't able to figure out exactly how many people started, but there was 139 finishers, which, people who aren't used to this distance of a race, when they hear that there's a race, sometimes they think, a big marathon type of attendance where you have, 1,000 or 2,000 or, there's a 10K race here called the Boulder, and they have like 55,000 people show up. And so, there's a lot that has to be done over a 200-mile course. even though, you might have 200, 300 people start, and half of them may not even finish. And so it looks like there was like 101 DNFs, but how'd that race go for you?
Yeah, it went, they're all roller coasters. They're all full of highs and lows. That one was so I never really, in my first 2 Tahoes, this was my third, in my Moab 240, so my prior 200s, never entertained the thought of quitting. But partly, and I tell people this, once you've DNF'd one race, you got to be careful, because it can be a, again, kind of a slippery slope, and get you into a mindset of thinking that's okay, when you really need to think that's not okay. Quitting is, quitting for injury, that's okay. Quitting because it's no fun anymore, that's never okay in my book. So it never really, I never really struggled with, the mental or psychological pressures to quit in a 200. But having come off of, again, 2 DNFs in 2021, I think that unfortunately put me more prone to consider it. So I got to the halfway point. It was cold and windy. And this was the first year where they moved the race to June. There was, snow patches up at the higher elevations. It snowed and rained and sleeted during the course, depending on who you were and where you were at. But a decent amount of weather, nothing terrible. A lot of wind. A lot of people suffered from the DNF rate was really driven by breathing issues. A lot of people had allergies and asthma type symptoms. I think some people ended up post race having to go to the hospital. So a lot of just junk in the air. I don't know what it was exactly, but I had some symptoms, wasn't terrible, but I got halfway in and I was done. My feet, I thought, were toast. I thought I had blisters all over my feet. I had changed into some newer shoes, shouldn't have done that. And I was just trashed and tired and miserable. I raced all year without any crew or pacers. I just decided after last year that I kind of wanted to try it alone. So that was the first 2, because my 3 prior 200s, I had quite a bit of support, pacers and crew. So I got to halfway and I want to quit so bad. And so I went into the aid station, told the medical guy there, I'm done. I'm pulling the ripcord here. And he just kind of looked at me and kind of grinned and said, why in the world would you quit? Like, you're in the top 15, maybe top 10. You got all the time in the world. Why would you quit? And I'm like, my stomach's upset. I've got like acid reflux going on. My feet kill. I'm tired. I'm cold. I'm miserable. I'm done with this stupid thing. And he just said, no, I think I'll go get you some food. Why don't you lay down here, take a nap? I'll look at your feet. He looked at my feet. He said, he just kind of laughed when he looked at my feet. He's like, these are the best feet I've ever seen at an aid station before. Like, your feet look great. So that kind of made me feel like a wuss. So I took a nap, turned it around, and then, second half was much better than the first half. And I kind of gotten over that mental hurdle. But it was it was super rough for quite a while. But yeah, it worked out. I don't normally pay attention to what place I'm in a 200. In fact, I don't think I'd ever, in the prior 3, ever looked at, asked, or was even told what place I was in at any point during the race. But I had set a goal in advance. I put Post-it notes up all over my house, top 10 Tahoe, top 10 Tahoe, top 10 Tahoe, on all my computers, bathrooms, fridge, everywhere. And so my family knew that I wanted to be top 10. So with about 60 miles to go, I did get on my phone and look at the tracker and see that I was in 12th place. And so clipped along until I got to 10, but then I thought, okay, now I'm in 10th place, but if someone passes me, I won't be in 10th place, so I probably need to keep moving up the leaderboard. So ended up with 8th place, but it was all in all, it's hard to say, 67 hours, when a lot of people are suffering for another 24, 27, 30, I mean, up to literally 30, 36 more hours out there than I spent out there. It's hard to say, oh, that was a rough race, but it felt rough there for a good 50 miles, just really painful.
So a couple of questions for you on this race in particular. I know that a lot of the people you had mentioned had breathing issues. I think some of them, you've mentioned allergies. There was a theory going around that some of it could have been from some of the chemicals they put down previously to put out some of the forest fires, and it could have just been the ash and all of that. But did you experience any of that yourself?
Yeah, so I on the last day, on my day 3, I could not stop coughing and having like phlegm and junk in my throat that I was trying to kind of spit out for about, well, pretty much all afternoon. And it came out of nowhere. I didn't realize other people were struggling with this because, most of that rate, most of these races towards the front of the pack, you spend most of the race alone, especially if you don't have a pacer like I didn't have. So I wasn't really aware during the race that there was any concerns around this. It just kind of came out of nowhere for me. I didn't really notice any respiratory issues on days 1 and 2. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess there could be some chemicals. I'd be surprised. That theory doesn't ring true for me. I do know that normally that time of year, Tahoe does have quite a bit of pollen in the air, and it can always be dusty. And so it's common, I mean, people that live in the Tahoe area, they have a term for it that time of year. They call it the Tahoe cough. So I think some of it is normal. I think it was colder. It was especially at night, and cold, drier air. If there's anything, any junk in the air, obviously that can just exacerbate people who are already prone to asthma or allergies. I think that's what it was. I think it was colder, drier, with some junk in the air, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't especially bad for me. I feel really, badly about everyone else that struggled, because even those few hours of coughing were just like super draining, to constantly be coughing. So if people were struggling with that day 1 and then day 2, I can only imagine how rough it was.
All right, I want to move on to Bigfoot, but before I do, 2 final things on Tahoe. The first one is, with these 200s, one of the sort of unknowns that doesn't really carry over from the 100-mile distance is something you've already talked about, which is the sleeping and sleep strategy. Staying up for 30 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours is possible. obviously your performance starts to drag, but to go 67 hours, what was your sleep strategy like, and how many times did you sleep? Did you break that up into different chunks?
Yeah, so uh, sleep is the hardest thing for me to get right, and I have to imagine, and I've heard from many people that it's a big part of the race. And I think your strategy should be limited to not when. You shouldn't worry about when you're going to sleep. I think it's more about how you're going to sleep. When you sleep is when you've really slowed down and you're not moving very fast anymore. You should probably, take a break and sleep, because I've literally so many times, zombie walked, zombie marched, 2 miles an hour, mile and a half an hour. And, every time I do that, I know that if I had taken a 15-minute, nap, or a half-hour nap, or an hour nap, I would have been ahead, right? I would have been literally ahead of where I was at that point, and not so miserable to boot. So I think the tricks around sleeping are, what are the conditions around around you in which you can actually sleep? I'm a light sleeper anyways, so I carry 2 sets of earplugs, foam and wax. I put the foam in the inner ear and I put wax on the outer ear, because unless it's really quiet, I can't sleep. I also have a modified poncho that's kind of like almost like a sleeping bag. And I put this thing in, and I wrap up in it so that, no bugs get on me. I'm out of the dirt. And basically between those 2 things, I can sleep kind of almost anywhere on the trail. And I've gotten really accustomed to, rocks in my ribs and, other things. So other people, maybe they can't sleep on rocks and twigs and dirt, but for me, it's about knowing that you're prepared to sleep wherever you need to. And for me, that's mainly on the side of the trail, because it's really rare for me to feel both tired enough and for the conditions to be quiet, not a lot of ambient light or noise, to actually sleep at an aid station. And a lot of aid stations are actually not in locations that are conducive to sleep. Some of them are actually in cold spots. They'll be at lower, hollows in the terrain that are just trapping cold air. So it actually, for me, can be quite a lot, more comfortable just off the side of the trail. Problem is, do you have the stuff on your pack to allow you to sleep off trail?
Yeah. How many hours would you say total? And I know you've done 6 of these now, so it's probably starting to get difficult to keep it separate. But if you were to take a guess, what was your total number?
Yeah, so Tahoe, my total was about 3 hours, an hour and a half at the turnaround, and then about 45 minutes at the next aid station at Spooner, and then 5 to 10 minute here and there naps, maybe 3 other naps for another half hour or so. So about 3 hours total. The biggest problem I had at both Bigfoot and Moab was, even when I laid down, I couldn't sleep. Unfortunately, I would have wanted more, but I only slept about 2 hours at Bigfoot and only about an hour at Moab. I really wanted, and I kept complaining to Phil Lowry, and to this day, he keeps teasing me about this, but I kept complaining And Phil and I at these things go different speeds, but he keeps trucking along. And every race, Phil and I will leapfrog each other, just like you and I did a bit at Moab, Tony, but we'll leapfrog each other like 10, 12 times during the race. So we see each other and chat at every race. But so I had mentioned to him several times, and to his son, I couldn't sleep at Moab. I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of kind of death marching at Moab. Moab was also rough. Bigfoot, yeah, so 3, 2, 1, kind of 6 hours total across the 3 races.
Wow. So, okay, so let's go ahead and move on to Bigfoot. So you finish Tahoe, you finish in 8th place, and you actually run a race in between those. I think for the sake of time, we won't be able to cover that, but sure. I just want to point out that not only did you run these 3 200-mile races, but in between each one of these races we're talking about, you also went out and decided to just supplement with an additional 100-mile race in between each one. So
so I did Elkhorn 100. It was his inaugural year. Our mutual friend Cody Reeder did Elkhorn with me. That's how I got to know him quite well, because we spent many hours on the trail. But that was remote Wyoming, most remote, kind of scary race I've ever done. 2 of us finished out of the 4 who started, and so it was a whole other set of stories around that race. But Bigfoot, yeah, so I did that roughly right in the middle. Well, actually, no, I didn't. It was the end of July, so it was only like 2 weeks. Yeah, I guess 2 weeks prior to Bigfoot, I did the Elkhorn. Elkhorn was a beast. It was rugged, Wyoming, remote, tough terrain, a lot of navigation, a lot of bushwhacking. It was a rough race. So 2 weeks later, I was feeling fine. I don't need a lot of recovery time after in between races. I don't taper. I don't believe any of that stuff. So I just keep going. So I don't think it hurt me. I wouldn't say it helped me. Probably better training I could have done than do another 100. But yeah, so I felt good going in. I was super intimidated by Bigfoot. I hadn't done it before. It could be, it can always be rainy. I was concerned about all the water crossings, because depending on the year, I hear you have to get wet a lot. My feet don't do well when wet. That actually didn't turn out to be too big of an issue. The bugs were way worse than I thought. I got eaten alive by mosquitoes and horse flies, and got stung by hornets and bitten by ants when I lay down. It was hard. That was part of the reason why I didn't sleep more there. But Bigfoot was just tremendous. I did something better at Bigfoot than I did at Moab, which was I buddied up with people. So I buddied up with some new friends that I made on the trail. Couple Brians and Sean Nakamura. I spent a lot of time just sticking with those guys. I mean, and it became kind of part of our mutual plan. I'd come into an aid station, say, and wait, say, hey, Brian, when are you going to leave? Or Sean or whoever. And they would wait for me a little bit. I'd wait for them a little bit, and we just kind of stick together. And it really helped through the nights, because again, I cannot stay awake, but having someone to talk to, that was the one thing about pacers that I missed the most, was having someone to talk to at night. So as long as I was with Sean or one of the 2 Brians, talking, I was fine. And your mood is better. You don't even notice the miles. They're just kind of clicking away. And unfortunately, that great lesson I learned and kind of strategy I employed at Bigfoot, I kind of lost track of it at other races, including Moab. That's why when we left that Road 46 aid station, Tony, and I saw you leave before me, I ran up to catch up with you because I wanted someone to talk to. So thanks for hanging out with me for a bit on the race.
For sure. Well, that's one of the things I was going to ask you. You'd mentioned earlier that these 3 races you did without crew or pacers, and the 3 previously you had crew or pacers, right? And so how do you think that affected your performance? Was it easier because all you had to do was focus on you? Was it harder because there wasn't people there to pump you up? Yeah, and I totally get the buddy system of finding somebody to be with on trail, but was it the same as having a dedicated pacer and dedicated crew? Like, how did that affect you?
Yeah, you know, I'd say the pros and cons almost washed each other out. The net effect was, I don't think it affected my my race. I don't think I would have gone faster or slower with crew and pacers than I did without. It's definitely less for me. I tend to worry a lot about my rate, you know, my pacers and my crew. If I take too long to get to the next aid station, I imagine them sitting there worried or frustrated or annoyed that they're waiting for so long for me to get there. I worry about them getting lost. You know, some of these aid stations are pretty complicated to get to. I have had, you know, at Moab in 2020, I had 2 friends, you know, one dropping off my my pacer and then picking up the one that I was going to drop at Pole Canyon. So from Road 46 to Pole Canyon at Moab, you know, they got up into the LaSalle's and they didn't make it. So my one pacer had to go another leg all the way to Geyser Pass with me. They had my gear, so I had a change of shoes that I couldn't access because it was in the bag they were going to bring to me. Minor thing, actually, that didn't impact my race at all there. But it mentally did, because I was, you know, we were trying to get a hold of them on phone, and it's way more simpler to just do it yourself. Pack your drop bags so that you're self-sufficient. I know occasionally people haven't had their drop bag at an aid station. I've never had that problem. My drop bags have always showed up. So the things I miss the most, though, are the ability for my crew to bring me warm food. The destination trail races have gotten better, and they keep working to make to get better at the food. So the food this year was, I think, demonstrably better than it had been in prior years at the aid stations. But still, the aid stations, that, you know, you can only expect so much from an aid station. And so it was great at Tahoe in years past to have someone bring me McDonald's or Taco Bell or Subway sandwich or whatever the heck. And that's super helpful. I miss that. I miss having more gear available to me. You know, they bring a couple of big duffel bags with all sorts of clothes options, all sort of gear and ointments and food. And then I miss again, the companionship, you know, especially in the really low spots of a race. But you know, it's kind of a push, you know, it's simplifying the race, only having to worry about me, only having to worry about, and not having to feel bad if I need to go take a nap. I mean, I remember having at Moab again, I had 8 friends drive down to Moab. I mean, you know, my best friends in the world. The first year, you know, in 2020, I had 8 friends come down to crew and pace for me. And I felt like I was letting them down because I was going much slower than I wanted. And, you know, it's a lot more logistics to figure out. So for me, the net result was probably 0, but I did I did like just the simplicity of it. I know Phil again. I keep referencing Phil. It's just because he's kind of a kind of a mentor to a lot of us in Utah over the years. But Phil does a lot of his races with minimal or no crew and pacers, and I get why. After
Yeah.
having done most of my races now, hundreds and 200s by myself, it's just simpler. It's easier in some respects.
Yeah, Phil is a beast and a unique character. I remember the first time I did Moab, I saw him at the starting line, and we were chatting a little bit. And he had told me even before, because we were texting back and forth, and he had told me that he's like, I go out and I power hike the first half and just kind of just go and take it easy and see how I can do. And the first year I went out and I'm running, and of course I have an injury and some things that slowed me down, but it was so frustrating because I get into Indian Creek, so like mile 72, my legs hurt, I go into the medical tent, and I'm there like 5 minutes, and Phil walks up and he's just like, yeah, basically power hike the whole thing. And
Yeah.
he's like the Terminator. He's this one speed, this constant like pursuit of, so.
Yeah,
All right.
especially in 2020. In 2020, he was determined, and he took 5th or 6th place that year. He was just bound and determined to walk the whole way. And so, yeah, it was super frustrating because we kept leapfrogging, and this guy's just walking.
Yeah.
And I can't seem to get ahead of him with all the running I'm doing. And we call it locally here in Utah, we call it the Phil shuffle, but he wasn't even shuffling. He was, the shuffle is when he's kind of jogging, but he was just walking. Now he was going to walk the whole way. I'm pretty sure he ended up jogging towards the end because he was getting frustrated by all the walking. But yeah, he is just the most consistent, steady paced guy in the field every race, for sure.
All right, back to Bigfoot. Let's wrap this up, and then we'll go to Moab. So
Sure.
at Bigfoot, you just finished in 8th place at Tahoe. You line up at Bigfoot. Does it occur to you now, like, is winning the Triple Crown or placing in the Triple Crown, is it even on the radar at this point?
No, not really. I mean, I was on the wait list for Moab. So I wasn't even sure I would be able to get into Moab. Yeah, it didn't really become much of a goal until after Bigfoot. I didn't, who knows what's going to happen at Bigfoot. I mean, I could have finished a day later. Who knows? So, and I wasn't familiar with who was doing the triple and, how fast they were. But after Bigfoot, with Wes Rittner not having been able, again, due to medical issue, not being able to finish, Tahoe, after I looked at, who had done the first 2 and was still in it, I thought, okay, well, there's a chance I could do this. And I had a decent lead at that point. So that's, yeah, I mean, and so that did affect my strategy at Moab, because Moab then was, hey, as long as I run a decent, solid race, it's not likely that, Phil, for instance, is going to make up 15 hours on me, or 12 hours, or whatever it was at that point in time. So, so yeah, but I don't really worry about my place again in the race much at any race, really, because I know I'm not going to win it. A podium finish is not going to happen either. So, yeah, so it was after, Bigfoot was awesome. It's probably my favorite course. My favorite course to run is Tahoe, because it's super runnable, and I'm A lot of it's in Placer County, my home county that I grew up, born and raised in. So there's that. It's the first place I went camping as a kid. So I just love, love, love Tahoe. But in terms of like majestical terrain, of the three, Bigfoot's definitely the winner.
Okay, so at Bigfoot, and I want to dig into this more with you, but we may have to do it kind of off camera, because I agree. I've seen some of the footage of Bigfoot and going around Mount St. Helens, and just it looks really pretty. But you finish Bigfoot, you finish in 14th place overall, 79 hours, 12 minutes. There's 135 finishers, so you're still finishing up towards the front of the pack with a 14th overall finish. Then you go on to do I think Bear next, right? You do the Bear 100 next, and then on October 7th you go and I think there's a total of like 112 days between the start of the first race and of Tahoe and then the start of Moab. So this is now your fifth race in 112 days. You're going to wind up with 850 miles total. But you line up, and at Moab you wind up. I'm going to give away a little bit, but you wind up placing 8th overall, finish in 79 hours, which historically, you said you took it easy, but historically 79 hours is still a really good finish.
Well, I took it easy from like from a mental. I don't think I left much out there on the trail. So I'm not suggesting I could have gone like significantly faster. All I'm saying is I took it easy in that I wasn't going to get caught up in the race or how fast I was going. I definitely pushed at the end. That last leg, I gave it all I could, and I ran most of it, and I was at points leapfrogging, mountain bikers in the technical section. So, I mean, I was putting it all out there. So I don't think I left much time out on the course, but I definitely just wanted to be more relaxed, knowing that, hey, as long as I finish and I don't do something stupid, and have a decent time, I could win the Triple Crown.
I think that's a really good point about going into these races with that sort of relaxed mindset. And you touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about Western States, but it seems like on these 200s, I mean, you got to be in shape. You got to be able to go the distance, but it's really more about keeping your mind protected from going to the dark place and getting too far over the edge where you decide to drop. And I mean, every time I saw you out at Moab, it just seemed like you were just having a blast and real calm and cool. And so it was
I don't
fun
know
to
how you could ascertain that, because most of the time, my memory of you on course was you passing me all the time. That's what I remember.
Well, it couldn't have been all the time because you finished in front of me, but yeah, it was fun to leapfrog with you. It was fun to spend some time on the trail with you. Since you kind of went into this race a little bit different, and you knew that as long as you had a decent performance, that you would have a good chance of winning the Triple Crown. Did that change? I know you said you only slept an hour, which to me, that is just crazy that you were able to have the performance you did with only an hour's worth of sleep. I'm actually thinking next year of increasing how much I sleep by a couple of hours, trying to be strategic. Because I think, and we touched on this too, but if you can figure out your sleep strategy, I think everything else falls into place in these 200-mile races, because being tired and doing that zombie walk, like you're talking, I mean, I literally fell asleep walking.
Yeah.
Like just my brain was just, and I was asleep. My feet were still moving, but I was out. And I think it's a little bit like, being drunk or being on driving drunk or whatever. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you think you're making good decisions. You think you're eating enough. You think you're taking in enough water. And all of these things, you're just making stupid choices. And so
Right.
for you to do what you did on 1 hour of sleep is incredible to me.
Yeah, I mean, the faster people, right, the elite and people who win it, they're sleeping typically less than that even, right? They might get a couple 10-15 minute cat naps in. Yeah, maybe a good point of reference is, so 2019 I was in much better shape. I'm also 3 years younger in 2019 than 2022 at Tahoe. And I slept, I want to say, closer to 10 hours. Maybe it was only 6 to 8 hours, but it was significantly more. It was 2 or 3 times what I slept this year at Tahoe. I was in better shape. I slept longer. I finished in 2019 about 30 minutes faster. So basically the same time, a little bit longer. So, I mean, really kind of per mile, probably identical pace, average over the course of the race, but I slept a lot more. 2 races are always apples and oranges, even on the same course, because different things happen. Sure. But I'll tell you, I felt definitely felt better. My mood was probably better, that year in 2019. I don't know what optimal is. I don't think. All I can say is I think 3 hours, definitely 2 or 1 hours, are not enough for me. I think I need 3 to 6 to be kind of more in that optimal range. That's just me. Everyone's different. But I don't know how, these people like Courtney and Mike, McKnight, I don't know how these people go that distance on almost no sleep, but they do. I mean, Sean Nakamura, when he's done really well there, he basically doesn't sleep. I talked to him about it, and I mean, that's great that he can do that. I don't think I'm physically capable of going that far without sleep.
I think, and I can't remember, I think Courtney maybe finished, I don't remember, it was like 57 hours or something like that.
She did in 2018, the first year I did it. She was there at Tahoe, and she did it sub 50.
Yeah, from Tahoe. Yeah, for Moab was the one that I was saying, because Mike finished. I think he has like the snow course record, and she has the other record.
Yeah. Or Jeff does now. I think Jeff might have.
Oh yeah, Jeff Browning just took it. I think he finished in 57 hours, and Mike finished in 55 on the other one. But so, I mean, I can imagine staying awake for 55 hours, but I don't know if I could imagine staying awake for 55 hours and running 240 miles. So I've got some work to do.
Yeah, it's insane.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, a couple of last questions for you. The first one is, as you look back at your whole racing season this season, you had a great season, great performance. What's one thing you can look back and say, you planned all these things out, but what's one thing that didn't go according to plan? As you look, because we all make these plans of how these races are going to go. And
they never
what's the one thing that sticks out in your mind? Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. They never go as planned. I think the hardest thing to deal with was the lack of sleep that didn't go to plan. Again, I don't plan so much where or when exactly I'm going to sleep, but just the frustration of having, I laid down I laid down on the side of the trail at Moab at least 24 times. And I fell asleep for, no more than a minute almost every time. There's only a couple times where I even slept like 5 minutes at Moab on the side of the trail. So laying down, sitting there, not moving, getting cold, and also not sleeping, that was the thing that was just really tough to handle mentally and physically.
Do you think that it had anything to do with, since you didn't have a crew or since you didn't have a pacer with you, were you worried about waking up on time, or is it just your body was?
I don't know. I don't know what it was. I mean, I would even like scope, keep going, waiting for an extra comfortable spot to lay down. And I just couldn't, I don't know. I don't know if it was caffeine. I don't know if it was, it's still bizarre to me. I haven't figured it out. Again, that's the puzzle, the puzzle I haven't solved at these things. I know how to take care of my feet now. I know what foods work. I know how much, how many calories per hour I can stomach before, my gut goes sour. All that stuff, I feel like I generally know. I cannot seem to figure out the sleep puzzle. I don't know what it is. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I think when we get that dialed in, I think that's what's going to really have the biggest impact, is
For
dialing
sure.
in the sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question for you. So you finished, and I'm going to just focus on these 3 races. I know you finished 5, and I know I looked at your ultra sign up. I mean, you had a lot more races last year than just the ones in this section. But if you can kind of focus on this time period here, these 112 days, what would you say you learned from the experience of completing all 3 of these, 200+ mile races in a single season? What stands out the most, either what you learned about yourself, what you learned about just training, performance, what kind of stands out the most for you?
I mean, about myself, I would say just that I've gotten over that mental hurdle that kind of formed last year, that kind of openness to quit. All of my life, I felt like, I've prided myself in not being a quitter. Like when it comes to grit, I've always felt like I have as much grit as anyone else out there. But I started to doubt myself, after 2 DNFs last year. Am I really that tough? Do I really have that grit? And then it came into question, at at Tahoe. First really big race of the year. And really, hats off to that medical volunteer at the aid station, because I didn't have anyone there to pick me up, so I wasn't gonna leave the aid station anytime soon. But still, he helped me out, and I got over that hurdle, and then that was it. Like, I've done the 200's, and I've done 4 100's since then, and never, got that kind of devil off my shoulder, I guess. I'm not going to listen to that voice anymore. I'm over that. Training wise, I would say what I've learned is, just again, kind of law of specificity. I know a lot of people cross train and they do, some weight training and they do a lot of stuff, but for me, just sticking to running, that seems to keep me healthiest. So I think that's been kind of a nice lesson on the year, because it also takes away that question that I often struggle with, like, is this the optimal way to train, or should I be doing other things? And I really think you can run and be healthy running and running only. You don't need it. That's for me. Everyone's body's different. This is not general advice for people, but that's helped me not get stressed out about, oh, well, maybe I should work in some cycling or swimming or, strength training. I've proven that you can race a lot, race every month, 100 or 200 miler each of the last 7 months without any real injury or issues arising.
Yeah. Well, Jason, it's been great having you on. Congratulations on last year and on your performance and on winning the Triple Crown. I mean, that's just an incredible feat. I look forward to seeing you out at the Triple Crown again this year.
Yeah, we'll be spending some good trail miles together, Tony.
I think so. I hope so. But I'm going to leave you with any last words you'd like to say. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
No, I appreciate the time, and yeah, you didn't ask me the question everyone asked me, Tony, and that's probably because you've done this, but everyone asks why you do these things, and I think maybe because the answer that most of us share in terms of the why. I do it because it's hard. I like to challenge myself, and it's a fun puzzle to try to solve. How do you optimize something that has so many widely varying, factors? It's this massive puzzle, and it's a surprise every time you've got to problem solve, and that's why I do it. It's hard, and it's a fun puzzle.
Yep. All right, I said I was going to give you the last word, but I'm going to tack something onto there just for your benefit. So there's a book, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks when I'm running. There's a book called The Comfort Crisis, and it really speaks to that. It speaks to the fact that as a society, we've just gotten so soft and so comfortable. We get upset if our thermostat is 2 degrees off, or if there's 4 people in front of us in line, and it's just we're all longing for something to conquer, to feel good about ourselves. So whether it's running or something else, we're all looking for that thing to be able to give us the feeling that we are good enough, we can overcome. And so you might want to check that out. I'll list it down in the show notes, but yeah, it's called The Comfort Crisis. I forget who put it out, but I think you'd really like it.
Yeah, it's totally up my alley. Thanks for that.
All right, buddy. All right,
Okay.
thanks. We'll see ya.
Yeah, great talking with you, Tony. See ya.